Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the wall collapse which led to the closure of 17 Edinburgh schools. A report says pupils could have died.
Somebody needs to be held culpable for this, because that could have been a kid. In fact, it could have been a whole class load of kids.
The inquiry blames a lack of checks and says problems could be more widespread. Also on the programme, 4 more councils agree to put up the basic rate of council tax as the freeze ends. 22 school children are taken to hospital after the bus they were travelling in overturned. The unpaid work done by offenders. The government says it benefits local communities and keeps conviction rates down. And a former Rangers captain says manager Mark Warburton hasn't been given the financial backing he deserves. Good evening. An independent report into safety failures that forced the closure of 17 Edinburgh schools has blamed the council and the partnership which managed the building contracts. It began with the collapse of a wall at Oxgangs Primary School in January last year, which the report says could have killed pupils. That led to safety checks and the closure of the schools, which caused major disruption for 8,000 school children. Today's report found there had been a lack of proper scrutiny of the construction work and warned that the problems may be more widespread. Our reporter Cameron Buttle is at Oxgangs Primary this evening. Cameron.
Well, it was the day that Storm Gertrude struck, and it was only a matter of timing and luck that no one was killed or injured, according to today's report. It all started here at Oxgangs Primary School, where a wall collapsed. Why? Well, largely because of things like these, wall ties. They're used to connect the inner wall to the outer wall. And according to today's report, they weren't fitted properly here at this school and at many others.
This is where the children sheltered on a windy day at playtime. This is where 9 tons of rubble fell, hundreds of bricks peeling off the wall, crashing to the ground. Luckily, it happened just before the school gates had opened for the day. Parents are still angry.
It's ridiculous. It's actually the fact that they can build a school that holds 500 children and not check it out and not have anybody independent to check it out. It's complete and utter farce.
I'm very angry because I could have obviously got a phone call to say, well, your son's not here. He's went to school and you're not going to pick him up.
Somebody needs to be held culpable for this, because that could have been a kid. In fact, it could have been a whole class load of kids.
This sparked an urgent inspection of schools built under the same scheme. There are 17 of them, and all were found to be faulty, and all were shut down, causing massive disruption. The main findings of the report are that the 17 schools affected were badly built, that there was a lack of supervision that would have picked up bad practices, and the problems were not down to the use of public-private partnerships to finance the projects. The problem was with wall ties, metal fixings that strengthen the inner and outer walls. A BBC Scotland investigation revealed that the problem was not confined to Edinburgh. These pictures show faulty fixings in a school in East Renfrewshire.
The fact that there were different contractors, different subcontractors, and the same faults turned up in these schools and in the other schools in Scotland, where we've had 5 wall collapses in the last 4 years. It says that this is something which isn't just here in Edinburgh or in schools.
It's going to be down to a number of agencies, we believe, right across the UK and the construction industry itself, to look at whether the quality assurance of those buildings is good enough.
The closures caused massive disruption across the city, more than 8,000 children affected and their families. The report praises the council for their response to getting pupils to class and says learning did not suffer.
Stay healthy.
But for one family, they still lack confidence in the building.
I still don't stand next to that wall now. I know they've fixed it and I've seen them physically drill holes into every bit. But yeah, it does put you off kind of standing too close.
Yeah, it's a lot quieter part of the playground than it used to be.
Tonight, the Scottish Government says it is writing to all local authorities across Scotland, highlighting the report's recommendations.
Tonight there is a sense that this report hasn't answered all of the questions that have been asked. There's no finger pointing at any one individual, organisation or company. For example, all the construction firms involved have either merged or changed management. As for the Edinburgh Schools Partnership, the company that manages the schools to this day, it says it's still studying the report.
Cameron, thank you. 4 more councils have agreed to put up the basic rate of council tax from April. The average bill will rise by £3 or £4 a month, while around a quarter of people will face more significant rises because of national changes to the way their council tax is calculated. Edinburgh Council today became the first big council to confirm a rise, but as our local government correspondent Jamie McIver reports, councils are still under huge financial pressure.
Lord Provost and the Reverend Fiona Bennett.
Council Budget Day is a day of tradition, inside council chambers and outside.
Public sector cuts are a crime. Politicians and POSUM should do the time. Public sector cuts.
For years, councils have faced tough spending decisions, but this year there's a difference. Councils across Scotland can now put up the basic rate of council tax by as much as 3%, but this certainly won't mean the end of cuts and savings. Many councils aren't proposing new headline-grabbing cuts this year, and protesters argue one big issue is about what some call cutting by stealth.
Council staff are feeling incredibly overstretched at the moment. I mean, in Edinburgh we've lost over 1,400 members of staff in the last year or so, and that of course increases the workloads that people have.
People can't provide the service that they want to provide. You're not getting it. You can't actually get out to meet the people that you're meant to be meeting.
Typically, the council tax makes up only 15 pence of every pound a council spends. Some council leaders want new powers to find other ways of raising cash, reducing their dependency on the Scottish Government.
I would personally raise a hotel tax tomorrow if I had the power to do so. I would personally raise a workplace parking levy tomorrow if I had the power to do so, but I don't have those powers.
Edinburgh Council is one of 5 councils to have now agreed to put up the basic council tax by 3%. Aberdeenshire opted for a smaller rise. Typically, an average bill will go up by between £3 and £4 a month. But around a quarter of us face bigger rises. The bills in bands E, F, G and H are rising everywhere because of changes to the system. Alan Wolf's annual bill will now come to almost £1,600.
I've spoken to some of my neighbours, and most of us say we are prepared to pay a wee bit more if it's going to be held locally and local decisions are made on how to spend that money.
Others face even bigger rises, and some will be less sympathetic than Mr Wolfe. All councils should reach decisions on the council tax within the next 3 weeks.
And Jamie joins us now from outside Edinburgh Council. Jamie, can we assume now that all councils will raise council tax for everyone?
In short, Laura, no, we can't. Here at Edinburgh Council, there is no real doubt over how the decision would go today, but 2 councils had already indicated that their plan was to try to maintain the freeze on basic bills. That's South Lanarkshire Council and Inverclyde Council. They're both Labour-run councils, and I would say that was a fairly interesting move by them. These councils would no doubt argue they were trying their best to help family budgets, but they leave themselves open to criticism by campaigners that by not raising the council tax, they're not doing all that's within their power to at least try to mitigate the impact of cuts. While the Scottish Government would no doubt argue that a council which doesn't raise the council tax can hardly complain about how much government funding they're getting. And there are also a few other councils that have still to make their intentions public.
Thank you, Jamie. The First Minister has faced claims that her government has let down a generation of school pupils. The Holyrood row followed analysis from a think tank which suggests that bright pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds in Scotland lag well behind their more affluent classmates. The Sutton Trust also suggested that Scotland's brightest pupils are performing below international standards. The First Minister insisted action was already well underway to remedy the problems. Here's our political editor, Brian Taylor.
If these warnings about Scotland's schools sound familiar, they are. The Sutton Trust took data from an international survey and matched pupil performance with background. They found that bright children from poorer households are more than 2.5 years behind their wealthier classmates by the age of 15. In England, the gap in attainment linked to wealth is even greater, but today's report highlights a distinctive Scottish problem. Unlike in England, Scotland's brightest pupils scored below the average for developed countries. The Trust found no area in which the brightest 15-year-olds in Scotland really excel, and they noticed a pronounced and sustained decline in science over a decade.
First Minister.
A decade, of course, of the SNP in power at Holyrood.
It is a generation of Scottish children that are being left behind in the race for qualifications and for future jobs. Scotland used to lead the world in education. Why, under this SNP government, are we always playing catch-up?
Time and time again, I have come here and argued that the SNP are leaving the poorest children behind. Now this report shows that they are also holding the brightest children back.
A sombre education secretary by her side, the First Minister noted that the basic figures were already 2 years old. But no excuses. Action was needed and was already in progress.
We have embarked upon a programme of reforms in our education underpinned by substantial additional funding going straight into the hands of head teachers. There are head teachers right across this country right now who last week got told of the substantial additional funding that they will have at their direct disposal to invest in additional teachers or the things that they think will help raise attainment.
The First Minister said, again, that education was her top priority and, like a political exam candidate, she was ready to be judged by results. Brian Taylor, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
Crews searching for missing kayaker Dominic Jackson have discovered a body. The 35-year-old was reported overdue on Sunday night after leaving for a weekend trip from Portsoy in Aberdeenshire. His kayak was located 4 days ago near Leibster in Caithness. The body, which is yet to be formally identified, was found nearby. Typhoon aircraft from RAF Lossiemouth in Murray and RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire have been scrambled to monitor 2 Russian Blackjack bombers. The Russian aircraft were said to have flown an arc around the top of Scotland from a north-east direction before passing to the west of Ireland. The Ministry of Defence said they were not in UK airspace. 22 schoolchildren have been taken to hospital after the bus they were travelling in overturned and crashed down an embankment in Cumbernauld this morning. It happened as the bus arrived at Our Lady's High School at around 9:15. Although there were no serious injuries, a major incident was declared with ambulance, police and fire appliances sent to the scene. John McManus reports.
The scene outside Our Lady's School in Cumbernauld this morning. At 8:45, a single-decker bus carrying more than 40 children plunged down this ditch on Downfield Road. The bus rolled over onto its side. One pupil who got out said the driver helped his passengers to escape. It was all witnessed by this woman.
I literally saw the bus come down the hill and it's curbed. The wheel curbed, hit the curb. And then I don't know if it exploded or whatever, but there was fire coming out of it, and then I just saw it literally just flip right over.
A major incident was declared with 29 ambulances going to the scene as well as 3 fire appliances.
The bus was on its side and the escape hatches on the roof had been popped out, and we led the kids out through those openings. A lot of the kids were pretty upset, kids involved in the incident and my friends and colleagues who actually seen it happening. So it's a difficult scene for them, both involved and those who saw the actual incident itself.
Most pupils were initially taken into the school hall to recover. Later, 22 were taken to hospital. One 16-year-old girl being treated for non-serious injuries, the rest under observation. The council says it's investigating.
In North Lanarkshire, we take the safety of our young people very, very seriously. Parents on a daily basis give us their most important possessions as children, and it is important that we investigate this matter fully.
The vehicle was eventually pulled out from the ditch. It will now be examined. JD Travel have confirmed it was one of their buses that crashed. They said their driver is recovering. John McManus reporting Scotland, Cumbernauld.
More than 1.2 million hours of unpaid work was carried out by offenders in Scotland in the year to the end of last March. The government maintains the scheme benefits local communities and keeps reconviction rates down. Our Home Affairs correspondent Revel Alderson reports.
Paying back to society. Offenders who've received community payback orders as an alternative to a short prison sentence, delivering donations to a food bank. Fraser Johnston was sentenced to 240 hours unpaid work for wasting police time. He avoided jail, but he says it's not a soft option.
It gives me a bit of structure in my life. Before I had community service, I wasn't really doing much. I like sleep, we go out digging, we build fences and stuff like that, we paint the fences, and sometimes we're out in the cold and sleep in the rain and stuff like that in the snow. So I don't think it's a soft sentence, no, because it's quite hard work.
The food bank says it couldn't operate without these offenders. And there's an additional benefit.
The young men and women that are doing unpaid work hours get to see the community in action. They get to see what can be achieved. You know, if we work in partnership, they feel as if their contribution is valued. They see that they're actually making a difference to the communities that they live in.
Breaking the cycle of reoffending, here in Bells Hill, offenders are refurbishing bikes to be given to local schools and refugee families. The Scottish Government says work like this is more effective at addressing the reasons why offenders have got into trouble.
Reconviction rates are now at a 17-year low. That has come about as a result of a greater use of community payback orders, because that helps to break the cycle of individuals going on to commit offences again in the future, and in doing that it helps to create safer communities.
Payback orders can also include help for offenders to deal with addictions or violent behaviour. The Scottish Government gave an extra £4 million last year to support community sentences and says the extra cash for local authorities who run them will continue in the draft budget. Revel Alderson reporting Scotland, Bells Hill.
You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 14 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. A report into the wall collapse, which led to the closure of 17 Edinburgh schools, says pupils could have died. And still to come, a former Rangers captain says manager Mark Warburton hasn't been given the financial backing he deserves. The family of a man from the Highlands who died in mysterious circumstances 20 years ago today say they hope a review of the case will lead police to his killer. 24-year-old Kevin MacLeod was found dead in Wick Harbour, and an initial police investigation concluded it was an accident, but his family maintain he was murdered and that police covered up the truth. Craig Anderson reports.
24-year-old Kevin MacLeod died after a night out in Wick with his pals, his body found in the town's harbour. Police from the then Northern Constabulary concluded that Kevin had stumbled over an ornamental bollard at the harbour side and that his death was a simple accident. His family have always insisted otherwise.
Kevin did not fall on an ornamental street bollard. No way. It's a ludicrous excuse. Kevin was kicked to death, and I believe he was put in the water.
A pathologist's report showed the young man had suffered serious internal injuries consistent with a beating before he'd entered the water. The local procurator fiscal told police to treat his death as potential murder. They didn't.
Everything from really day one was covered up. No proper investigations done, no door-to-door inquiries, didn't protect the locus. They didn't do anything. Everything in their procedures of the Legacy Force Northern Constabulary was done wrong.
A series of re-investigations and even a fatal accident inquiry have raised more questions than answers. But now the Chief Constable of Police Scotland has ordered another review.
Let's make no mistake, the family have been through hell in the last 20 years, and we are at the stage now that the reassessment of the circumstances is very welcome. Whether or not it will throw up any new evidence or any reason for a re-investigation, it still remains to be seen.
Police Scotland declined to be interviewed about the case this week, but they insisted this was not a re-investigation, but an assessment of the information surrounding Kevin MacLeod's death. Now, that distinction may be lost on many of us, but for Kevin MacLeod's family, it may lead to some hope of what they see as justice for Kevin. Craig Anderson, reporting Scotland.
Now a look at other stories from across the country. A 55-year-old woman who died after a house fire in Aberdeenshire has been named by police. Elmore Mitchell died after the fire in Kindrocket Drive in Braemar shortly after 6 this morning. Police Scotland said inquiries were ongoing, but there did not appear to be any suspicious circumstances. Patients may have to wait longer for treatment by a health board which has been bailed out by the Scottish Government for the last 4 years. NHS Tayside is considering increasing its waiting times in a bid to balance its books. NHS Scotland Chief Executive Paul Gray told MSPs on the Public Audit Committee that it was one of the options the Health Board had discussed to improve its financial situation. The Scottish Prison Service says it's identified a site for a new prison in Inverness. There were protests over initial plans to build the replacement for the city's ageing Victorial jail close to a growing housing development. The SPS will now apply for planning permission to site HMP Highland between an out-of-town retail park and a college campus. An international design competition has been launched to replace Edinburgh's Ross Bandstand. The venue in the city's Princes Street Gardens was developed in 1935 and has a capacity of 2,400. Architects are being asked to submit plans for a replacement pavilion, a visitor centre and a cafe. Once a winning design is chosen, it's hoped that building will begin by next year. The former Rangers captain Barry Ferguson says the club's manager Mark Warburton hasn't been given the financial backing he deserves. Warburton's side face Morton in the Scottish Cup this weekend, but it's faltering league form that has led to some fans asking questions about his future. But is the criticism justified? Jonathan Sutherland reports.
He's the man Rangers fans once lauded for turning their team's fortunes around. But with just one win in their last 5 league matches, the pressure is mounting ahead of Sunday's game against Morton. But should it be? Yes, Celtic are way out in front, but given their financial muscle, they were always likely to be. Second place was always the target, and it's still very much in sight. Rangers also remain in the Scottish Cup, but it's a dip in form and questionable signings that have seen eyebrows raised. So, to some examples. Striker Joe Garner was bought for £1.8 million. He's been a bit part player and has scored just 3 times. Joey Barton was a marquee signing, but he played just 8 times and left after a training ground bust-up. And then there's Matt Crooks. He signed a 4-year deal, played just 3 times and was then sent out on loan. But have the board backed him with enough cash?
I'm looking at it and thinking that he's not been back to see he would want him. I think he would have wanted to have strengthened even more. They need to finish second and then see what happens in the summer. Hopefully get a bit of backing from the board to go and spend a bit of money.
And now to Cowie, it's a good ball in. Fodringham couldn't take it, and it's Walker!
But the argument is he should have spent enough to avoid defeats like this 4-1 loss to Hearts. This is how the top of the table looks. Rangers just behind second placed Aberdeen. Roughly where they should be.
They could finish second. I think it'll be tight between them and Aberdeen for the remainder of the campaign. Could go either way. Rangers are not going to be convincingly second. And it's also worth remembering that Aberdeen have not had an outstanding season by their measure in the league.
But that will matter little to how Mark Warburton's success is measured. He says the random nature of football has worked against him. Not enough backing or not enough wins. Either way, victory at the weekend feels vital. Jonathan Sutherland, reporting Scotland.
Timeline is on BBC Two tonight at 7:30. Here's Shireen and Glenn with the details.
Andy Murray's just announced he's bringing Roger Federer to Glasgow. We have the world #1 on the programme.
Also tonight, we speak to a woman horribly disfigured by a dog attack.
And with BAFTA weekend coming up, we ask why Scotland still has no film studio.
As Shireen said, more on Andy Murray later, but when he announced that Roger Federer was coming to Glasgow, this was the unusual advice he had for the Swiss tennis legend.
Don't try the fried Mars bars. I tried one of them for the first time last year and it was horrific. So yeah, I'm gonna stay away from that.
Okay, no, not going to teach him how to put a kilt on.
No, he did. I saw a little video where he was wearing a kilt when he was announcing that I was going to play in his event over in Switzerland. It was worth looking at. Actually, it was quite good.
So you're going to put the lederhosen on for him?
I don't think so.
Now let's take a look at the weather. Christopher's here. Good evening.
Laura, thank you very much indeed, and good evening to you at home. There was some sunshine around today for some of us. Beautiful shot there from one of our weather watchers up in the northwest, but for many, it was a cloudy grey day. Far more cloud around than we had forecast, actually. Tonight, cold and frosty, dry for most, but those showers still with us across eastern Scotland, anywhere really from the borders up towards Shetland. Wintry in nature, even some accumulations of snow in places, particularly Shetland, Aberdeenshire and the borders. But the showers, not everyone will see them. Where they occur, icy. For many, though, a dry night and a cold night. In town, temperatures freezing, in the countryside, well below. So tomorrow. And once again, we have those showers affecting eastern parts, slippery in the morning in places. But for many, it's a dry, bright morning. Hopefully more sunshine around than we saw today. And crisp, certainly as we head through towards the afternoon. But it will be a cold afternoon. And certainly across inland areas, 3 or 4 Celsius probably at best. In fact, 1 or 2 spots perhaps struggling to reach anything above 0 or 1 degree. Those showers across eastern parts tending to ease off, still with us across the Northern Isles. Elsewhere, largely dry. Once again, the best of the sunshine will be across the northwest. And we've lost those brisk winds around the northwest coast and indeed the northeast coast, so not quite as bitter here, but still cold. Now, the rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, those showers still affecting coastal fringes, but for many, it's a dry night with a sharp frost. In fact, in the coldest glens, down to around -10. To the weekend, high pressure still with us, so largely dry, but we still have that nagging easterly. In fact, more of a northeasterly on Saturday, feeding in showers anywhere really from sort of Angus down towards the borders, perhaps inland as far as South Lanarkshire, wintry at times. Elsewhere, largely dry and bright, and certainly through the central belt and the south, those northeast winds really quite bitter. For Sunday, largely dry and settled, best of the sunshine once again will be in the west, further east a little more cloud, and once again, it will be really rather cold for all. That's the forecast for now.
Thanks, Chris. Now, a reminder of tonight's main news. An independent report into safety failures that caused the closure of 17 Edinburgh schools has blamed the council and the partnership which managed the building contracts. The report found a wall collapse could have killed pupils. That's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and then the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, from everyone here on the team and all around the country, have a great evening. Bye-bye for now.